I find transience at the bottom of coffee cups and the split ends of my hair. If I stand in the shower long enough, I begin to feel the hollowing out of my bones. But in that dim room, empty, save for the distant echoes of footsteps and whispers of Michelangelo, I feel full once more, given over to a life I must lose for the sake of permanence. Let me go, then, through streets filled with yellow smoke, off to join the echoes again. Okay, so that one doesn't have a title. I'm really bad at titles for the most part. This one was inspired by, and any literature nerds out there, you might recognize the references. This is inspired by the poem The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. That's a poem that is very meaningful to me, that I discovered during a time in my life where I could relate a lot to what the speaker was talking about. For those of you who haven't read the poem, it's basically about this kind of middle-aged guy who is like going out for a walk to a lover or an ex-lover's house or a potential lover's house to sort of like ask them a question, basically ask them out, I think. And he sort of ends up like going through this like thought spiral and sort of having not a psychotic break, but just sort of like descending, like I said, descending into this spiral of thoughts and images. It's a really beautiful poem. It's a really emotionally charged poem. I definitely recommend reading it. It's one of my favorite poems. I was thinking about it, and I think one of the things that the poem addresses is this idea, and I think this is something Eliot writes about a lot, is this idea of transience, like life and mortality. He talks about how he's aging a lot, which when he wrote the poem he was like 21 years old, but the speaker of the poem is like a middle-aged man, and so he talks a lot about aging. That's something I think about a lot, and something I'm kind of not, I don't know if scared of is the right word, but I don't like the idea that I'm not comfortable with the idea that I'm gonna get old and that I'm gonna die eventually. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, especially around my age. I don't know what it is, because I'm only 21, so I'm still very young. So saying I find transience at the bottom of coffee cups and the split ends of hair. A cup that was once filled with coffee and it is now empty. So this idea of loss, and things like the inevitability of it, like if you start out drinking a cup of coffee, like the only end is that you're gonna finish it, right? So that's inevitable, but then it's always disappointing when you do it. And then with the split ends of hair, that's sort of this idea of the body deteriorating, like sort of the physical aspect of transience, not just like the mental and emotional aspect, but like the physical deterioration of the body that comes with aging. And if I stand in the shower long enough, I begin to feel the hollowing out of my bones. Again, referring to the deterioration of the body, your bones becoming fragile and frail. As you get older, you like literally lose bone density and stuff like that. And I think standing in the shower, at least for me, I like sometimes I'll get lost in thought and my brain will just again go on this spiral, and I'll end up thinking about death and having some kind of existential crisis. This stanza here, but in that dim room, empty save for the distant echoes of footsteps and whispers of Michelangelo, I feel full once more. So this is again the first reference to the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. There's a repeated stanza, it gets repeated twice in the poem, that goes, in the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And so in that dim room, empty save for the distant echoes of footsteps and whispers of Michelangelo, I feel full once more. So that was sort of supposed to be a reference to the poem itself making me feel better. So like and that poem standing in for kind of all poetry, kind of all art, sort of as a catharsis for me and a way for me to cope with like these feelings, like either reading or writing like I am here. Then again, at the end, let me go, then the first line of J. Alfred Prufrock is "Let us go then, you and I." So that the "let me go then" was a reference to that. And then "through streets filled with yellow smoke." I don't remember what the exact lines are. I think it's at the third stanza: "The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes." And then so there's that image of this yellow smoke outside and like pressing in on the windows, and then it shows up again at the fourth stanza: "And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street." And I've always really liked that image of yellow smoke. I always thought it was really intriguing, and so I wanted to use that here. So I did. But yeah, so this was very much inspired by Prufrock, and some of the, I think the same themes are popping up, but it's focusing more on just that idea of transience and mortality, which is something that I've been writing a lot about recently. Because now that I'm at the ripe old age of 21, I'm starting to think about things like aging, and which I have no grounds to be thinking about at this age. Anyway, so yeah, that is what that poem is about.